What's going on, everybody? This is Brian Mazique, aka Unique Mazique, the hardest working man in sports and gaming. I am a fight guy. I'm a Forbes contributor, and I also write for Heavy.com. And I am here with my fellow fight guy, fellow Forbes contributor, and Boxing Manager of the Year nominee for 2019, Peter Kahn. What's going on, Pete?
Hey, Brian, everything's good. Just looking forward to another great show. Plus, for those that don't know, Fight TV just announced that they have some block program going on 11 Sports, which is going to put us on ATT Uverse as well as DirecTV. So that's pretty exciting news.
It is exciting. And as Peter kind of segued, we are powered by Fight TV. We are also presented by Bet Online. If you are watching us on Fight TV, remember, we are also available on YouTube. Go to YouTube right now in another browser if you're on Fight TV, and go ahead and subscribe to the channel. All you got to do is search The Fight Guys. I'm going to be doing a fight-by-fight breakdown of UFC 249 in separate videos that probably won't be on an episode of Fight Guys. So make sure that you subscribe to the channel for that. If you're watching already on YouTube, head over to Fight TV and go ahead and subscribe to that app, because they have an entire different collection of MMA content or combat sports content to offer. So with all that said, let's jump into round one. We're going to talk about UFC 249 taking place on May 9th. It's going to be in Jacksonville, Florida at the VyStar Memorial Veterans Memorial Arena. And just recently, MMA Junkie published the COVID-19 safety measures that will be in place for this event. And I think they're interesting, Peter, just overall, just period, because I think almost everybody is or should be at least somewhat interested in what exactly the UFC is going to do to make sure that this event is safe. So, and I know I was mentioning this to you before we started the show, that there may be some sort of correlation. I'm sure there'll be some similarities for when boxing decides to come back, or when boxing comes back as well. Would you think that's accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been speaking to different promoters, been talking to Top Rank and Matchroom and Golden Boy about potentially assisting in shows that they'll be doing in Florida, if they end up doing shows in Florida. Where they would use the training camp and the condos and a specific venue that we have a great relationship with. But one of the big conversation pieces was, okay, so how are you going to do testing? How are you going to do testing both at the training camp and at the venue?
Yes.
So, I've been sort of educating myself on this and talking to different people. The commission at first, I don't believe was going to mandate it, but now I think they are going to mandate it. Yes. And so what I've learned is that there's rapid testing, which I guess you get results back within, 15 minutes, maybe less.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the type of testing that would be done at some point. Like I said, I don't know all the nuances. I'm kind of learning that right now, but I do know that testing is going to be mandatory. Yeah. So like I said, even if the commission doesn't make it mandatory, the promoters are completely in concert where it will be mandatory for them, for both staff, fighters, production, and anyone that would participate in these events at all.
Okay. So yeah, I'm going to break down, like I said, it's 7 bullet points that were published, and this is specifically related to UFC 249 and the 2 events that are going to follow that same week there in Jacksonville. So the first one says the UFC notified fighters that only designated UFC staff members, on-card fighters, and their licensed quartermen will be allowed on the site. So that's one thing that I'm pretty sure, however you want to transfer that to boxing, I can imagine it being the same way. The second one is upon arrival at the host hotel, the fighters and their cornermen must take part in mandatory medical screenings and a series of tests. This process will be repeated daily as long as the fighters and teams remain at the hotel. Further testing details will be provided in person upon arrival. So that's a pretty ambiguous kind of a testing process right there. So it's open to a lot of different flexibility, more testing, whatever has to happen. I think it's probably smart verbiage, because you're preparing people, hey, just because you tested one time doesn't mean that you won't go through a series or more tests afterwards. So I think it's pretty smart verbiage. The third one says teams will then be informed of the weigh-in procedure and given credentials that are required to be worn at all times on the hotel premises. I'm assuming this is also something that says, hey, this person has been tested. If you do not have this credentials on,
right,
someone could essentially assume, have you or have you not been already tested? So this is I would think that part of it is more, is more strict than it is normally at these events. The next one says each fighter will be provided with an individual workout room. I think this is really important. Mats, mat sanitizer, and a personal sauna will be provided. So cutting weight right there the day or 2 days or so before a fight takes place is something that's pretty common, obviously, in MMA, I think in combat sports across the board. So that is a place where being sanitary is very important. Places like this is where you get stuff like staph infections and all that. So obviously, if you're getting things like that in that situation, you would obviously have some sort of heightened awareness about COVID-19. The next one says the host hotel's housekeeping staff will be on the premises taking extra precautions to sanitize rooms and provide 24/7 room service. Next, the UFC Performance Institute will be providing nutritional and trifecta culinary support for all of the athletes. Now, this one kind of really made me think about Perfecting Athletes, whom I know is working with a lot of boxers. So I was wondering if there would be a way for them maybe to even work with some of the fight promotions.
I literally had a 1-hour conversation with them yesterday.
Yeah, makes sense.
About that and how to do it. And we talked about, trifecta and the fighters having their option, as to who and how they want to work with. But in the scenario that we created, basically for the boxing at least, would create the meals for everybody, for staff, production, fighters, and would, personalize that. So, what you do is you just limit the ability for there to be a few things. And I hope you don't mind I jump in here, or did you want to?
No, okay. We only had one other one. But I do want to make sure that we share it because that's part of what I'm going to do with this video, because I want to definitely break this out. So if someone wants to kind of just get, get informed about.
So share it, give the 7th point, and then we can kind of touch on the food issue.
The last one is performance-related matters, it's in quotations, defined as injury or illness, can be treated by the on-site medical staff, but massages and flushes will not be. So that's the last one.
Okay. I mean, look, it seems like they put a lot of thought into it. I mean, it's not, maybe it's perfect, maybe it's not perfect. I definitely think they've put a lot of thought into how to create a safe environment. So, I mean, it's better than just saying you're going to get tested one time when you show up. I mean, it seems like they're going to do ongoing testing and they're going to try to mitigate as much potential opportunity for people to come in contact with the outside world and potentially, get sick.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I'm not, in that field at all. But I do feel better about the event overall, based off of the things that I've read here, which obviously come directly from the UFC and also from the state of Florida, in terms of, breaking out and setting up something that will make this as safe as possible, which is, I think, should be the number one priority for everybody involved here. So I don't know, you would be able to answer this question much better than me. It sounds to me that almost all of this is transferable to boxing.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So, which is, I think, a good sign for more things taking place.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just all of it. I mean, it makes sense. Mm-hmm. Every promoter might want to do it in a different way or have a setup in a different way. Mm-hmm. But I think overall, all those procedures put in place is just going to create a safer environment for everybody.
I agree. It's good news. It's unfortunate that these precautions have to be in place, but you make the best of the situation as it is. And I think that this is definitely moving in that direction. So with that, we're going to go ahead to our first Between the Rounds.
So Brian, I read somewhere that, not somewhere, Mike Coppinger reported yesterday via sources that conversations are taking place for Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury to fight each other next in Saudi Arabia, and that apparently MTK are heading up those negotiations somehow, or those conversations with Fury. But I was completely dumbfounded, reading this to think that Matchroom and Top Rank would even consider not putting a Joshua Fury unification heavyweight title bout between two British heavyweights in the UK. I couldn't even imagine how going to Saudi Arabia would be a consideration. Now, I know what your answer is going to be and what everyone else is going to be in the comments. Oh, well, you're an idiot because they're going to get paid a lot of money. But there are some events like this that are at such a magnitude. Like I said, I'd be pressed to find out the last time two British heavyweights fought for the undisputed heavyweight championship. I just see that an opportunity for a fight like this to take place at, say, a Wembley Stadium in front of 90,000 plus fans for really boxing's greatest title. There's nothing bigger than the heavyweight championship, let alone the unified heavyweight championship. And the fact that a fight like this and a fight week like this and all the buzz and even the live gate revenue that could be generated wouldn't be enough. I mean, I think the British fans, with everything that's been going on in boxing over the past 4 or 5 years, deserve a fight like this. And I can't even imagine that Joshua Fury would be considered to be going to Saudi Arabia. Mm-hmm. And furthermore, I don't really even know if Pulev and Wilder are on board with this supposed step aside money, letting these guys do that, because we haven't heard from them yet. So that's my between the rounds. I'm interested in seeing hearing your thoughts on that, but that's what I got.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And I have a question that I want to ask you, because I know you weren't quite working with him yet at this time, mm-hmm. but there's something almost similar that happened, like what we're talking about over 40 years ago. And it's not exactly the same, but it came to my mind as we talked about this. So that's something I'm going to ask when we get to championship rounds. All right, but let's go into round 2. As of right now, it appears that Kell Brook is the front runner to be the next challenger for WBO welterweight champion Terence Crawford. I'm going to tell you how I feel about that particular matchup. I understand it. So first and foremost, let me say I understand it. And the reason why I understand it is because I'm well aware of the promotional tape and all of the boundaries and parameters that come into place with just making fights. A person who's maybe not aware of that sort of thing might just say, oh, why doesn't Crawford just fight Spence? Why doesn't Crawford just fight Porter? Why and on and on and on. We know that it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work. It's not that simple. So I understand essentially with Crawford and Top Rank and ESPN, they're basically trying to make fights make the best fights that they can make with the people that they can get to the easiest. And that's really what it boils down to. And the fact of the matter is Terence Crawford is almost fresh out of compelling opponents at 147 pounds who are within the weight range or reach. I shouldn't say weight range, within the promotional reach of Top Rank and ESPN. That's the deal. Kell Brook, in my opinion, is past his prime. I think that Kell Brook is one of those guys who took a risk for the sake of greatness, legacy, and a payday, obviously, which I don't blame him for. I'm not saying that that's like it's a dirty concept, but he took a risk going up to try to fight Golovkin. And he did well, all things considered. If you want to compare what the results of what Kell Brook got compared to what Mikey Garcia got going up fighting Errol Spence, I'd say Kell Brook did a much better job in his situation. Didn't jump as many weight classes, but still a significant jump. But I believe that loss cost him and he has not been the same since. I think he suffered a broken orbital bone in that particular fight, and I think he had the same injury on the other eye in another fight after that. So I just don't think Kell Brook's the same guy. He still has some sort of a name with some level of recognition, definitely in the United Kingdom and somewhat here in the United States. And while I understand it, I can't stand here and tell you that I'm super excited to see it. I don't know. Tell me what you think.
Right. No, those are good points. But, so it was Triple G that created the first orbital fracture for Kell Brook.
Right.
And then it was Errol Spence that created the second one.
Yes.
And I was at that fight in Sheffield back in 2017. And because I had someone on that show and I was there, the one thing I do remember, which we've talked about on this show in a previous episode, was that Kell Brook had a really hard time making 147 for the Spence fight.
Yes.
And I saw that personally. The day of the weigh-in, he was not in the best of condition. Barely could get out and up on the scale. Was struggling. You can tell he was struggling to make weight. But there's a couple of things here. So yeah, to your point, Top Rank could be running out of what they feel are sellable, not necessarily viable, but sellable opponents for Terence Crawford. Meaning, I'll give a shameless plug here. I managed Chris Van Heerden. Okay, he lost to Errol Spence Jr. It was a TKO. Didn't go out on his back. Wasn't counted out. The referee decided after 8 rounds or whatever round it was stopped, that Chris wasn't going to beat Spence, but he was giving him a fight, but he wasn't going to beat him. And so, referee stopped that fight. But when I watched Brook fight Spence, I think Brook was in the fight. There was a point where he was in that fight and then started to break him down, and the end was near, right? At that point, Brook was already a former world champion, right? I believe they were fighting for the vacant title, or were they fighting for Brook's title? I don't remember.
I don't remember, but I know Brook won the title by beating Sean Porter. He gave Sean Porter his first loss.
Right. So what I'm saying is that from a sellability standpoint, because I want to kind of make my point here, Top Rank is probably feeling like they're struggling like they did with Kavaliskis. They had to call it Crawford versus Green Machine, or Mean Machine, versus Mean Machine. So Crawford versus Mean Machine is how they marketed that fight, because they felt like, no one was going to be able to remember the name Kavaliskis, and I might even be pronouncing it wrong, or pronounce it properly, or even spell it. So even though Kavaliskis gave Crawford, I think, a good fight to a point.
Yeah, I definitely think he gave him a good fight.
What I'm saying is, you always have to look at a couple of factors. With all this time off, especially for Errol Spence Jr., coming off the accident, and now COVID-19 and everybody on hold, his last fight was against Sean Porter, which was a good fight. When did that fight take place?
The fight with Errol Spence and Sean Porter, that was September 28th.
Right. So it's with everything that's going on. Okay, we know that Crawford fought on December 14, 2019. So what I'm saying is that it could be over a year. Let's just say that Crawford and Spence were going to fight.
Right.
Well, that fight's not happening because that fight has to happen in front of a big crowd at a big venue like MGM Grand, or just something big, right? So in order for that fight to happen, there has to be this big buildup, and that place has to be packed, because there's going to be a big gate revenue attached to it, and that's a really big fight. So neither of those guys can fight each other right out of the gate after all this time off, especially if people aren't going to be fighting in front of crowds.
Right.
Maybe Top Rank could be thinking, I don't even know where this was said. Who said this, that Brook is the leading contender? Did Top Rank say this?
Well, the story that I was referencing was on Boxing Scene,
right?
And there was an interview with Bob Arum in the actual article.
So
he makes a reference to a couple other things too that we're going to talk about later.
So Bob could be floating it out there because he's got to do something for Crawford. Crawford can't sit there indefinitely, and he just might be thinking that if Brook's on the table, that at least it's a sellable fight. doesn't necessarily mean that he's not going to walk through Kell Brook at this stage of his career. Like the Amir Khan fight, there was a sellability to it, but in the end, it wasn't even competitive. And I see this being the same way, but I just think at this point, they can't go into a mega fight like a Crawford, Spence Crawford. They can't go into something like that yet, because with all of this that's happening, I think Errol Spence is going to look to get something in between before fighting Crawford. So it really just comes down to, you know, is this a fight they can sell? And also, is that a fight that could potentially take place without a crowd? I mean, I don't think so, but, you know, depending on how things play out, I mean, what if these venues aren't allowing fans back in up until October, November, December? You know, what do you do? Does Crawford sit out for a year as well?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, as I said, and I think we're probably on the same
Did I make
page.
any points?
I think so. You asked some questions, but I think
I feel like I just went in a big circle, but I was trying to make some points here. So,
well, I think essentially we're on the same page, because I understand the fight,
right,
and I understand why they would choose Kell Brook. I understand why, like you said, it's a sellable fight because
but it's
of the
not
name.
competitive.
Not necessarily competitive. Who knows? Maybe Kell Brook has another great performance left in him. Who knows? You don't know. He's been sitting for a while, which could help. But who knows?
We're talking about Crawford. We're talking about Crawford.
We are talking about Crawford, but you could make the argument that Terence hasn't looked as great in the last two fights as he has prior to that. Because you could also make the argument that Terence is now struggling a bit to stay at 147. So if the fight stays there, who knows? So these are just arguments that could be thrown out to kind of suggest that this fight could be more competitive than what you would think on the surface, because you think Terence Crawford, you automatically think top 2-3 fighters in the world. You think Kell Brook, you think used to be a top 10, top 12 fighter, probably is not that anymore because of the rigors of the sport and the different things that he's been through. So who knows? Who knows? I don't know. That's the way I see it.
Okay. I mean, I don't think Crawford looked bad in his last two fights. I think he fought a Kavaliskis that in large part the boxing public really didn't know. Mm-hmm. And I think that he just fought a more formidable opponent who dropped him, even though it wasn't counted as a knockdown. I mean, I think he knocked him down.
Yep.
And in addition, I mean, I thought that Crawford just walked right through Amir Khan before that.
Well, here's the thing. I didn't say he looked bad. I said he didn't look quite as good as he has in previous fights.
Right. What I'm saying is that we're selling Kavaliskis short by maybe Crawford actually had a really good fighter in front of him that would give a lot of other people trouble, is kind of the point I'm making.
No, I don't think I'm selling him Kavaliskis short. I think Kavaliskis is a very good fighter. I thought that before the fight started. But I did, and I mentioned this to you before in previous episodes, is that I didn't think that Terence fought him smart. I thought that Terence fought him to make the fight great and to make it exciting. Right. And so that was an issue that I had. The Amir Khan fight, while I thought that Terence was going to win, and I thought that Terence was doing obviously the more damage, and I also thought that Amir Khan did quit. I thought that Amir was having some success with hand speed and some subtle things that he was doing in close. I thought he was having a little bit more success maybe than people were giving him credit for. No doubt, a question in my mind, Crawford was winning and was probably going to win. Was definitely going to win the fight. Right. But I thought there was a little, and this is not to say, I mean, Amir Khan is a very talented guy. Unfortunately, what we remember or always associate with Amir Khan is getting knocked out by one shot. And, you know, Canelo knockout, the Danny Garcia knockout, and, you know, getting dropped by Breedis Prescott earlier in his career. Just that's the prevailing thing that we see. But Khan is extremely talented. He has exceptional hand speed. He's a very smart and good boxer. Unfortunately, his failures seem to have left more of an indelible image in people's minds than his successes. Right. So it just is what it is. But, you know, like I said, I feel like we're on the same page. We do both understand this fight. We understand why they would make it. It's just, that's not one that makes you go, yay. It just is that way. But let's jump into our next between the rounds. I think this is actually what we just discussed is a perfect segue for that, because I felt that Bob Arum had some really good points about COVID-19 pay-per-view events. And I'm going to be honest, I really hadn't thought about this exactly in the way that he put it, which is why you might, kind of forget that how much, and how long Bob has been in this game. And this whole conversation came up because someone had floated to him where they were talking about Crawford Porter, because both fighters have, during this quarantine time period, have talked about wanting to fight each other. And that's something that gained some steam. But I'm going to read you something that Bob Arum said in this interview. Keith Idek of Boxing Scene took a quote. He says, "Obviously, I don't do the fighting. Terence does. I like Sean Porter, but he's not my fighter. If Terence wants to do that fight, I'll do my best to see it happen. But again, wanting a fight, even when both fighters want it, the question is who's going to pay for it. And that's a whole big problem. You certainly couldn't do that fight without an audience." So then he goes in, and here's where the part I think where it gets really interesting. He says, "Even if you rely on the pay-per-view revenue, who knows how robust it'll be? People who watch pay-per-view usually do it with a whole group of people in their homes. And who knows when people are going to be willing to open up their homes to a substantial number of people. There's a lot of uncertainty now. We've got to go slow. We can't answer the questions as if we're back in the old days when things were normal." I think that that's really important to realize, because while we are talking about leaning heavily on pay-per-view or leaning heavily on, some sort of studio broadcast or what have you, we already know that we're sacrificing the gate, right? Because people can't come to the venue. But Bob brings up this other point of how COVID-19 could even affect pay-per-view buys, because some people say, "Hey, I'm going to order it. You guys come over, everybody gives me $2, $3, $5. It takes some of the edge off of the price." Some people just don't feel compelled to order it unless they got a lot of people at home to watch it with them, fight parties essentially. So it's really interesting to see how this would possibly affect. Now, I know ways, obviously, you could do a fight party on Zoom, and it would probably be pretty awesome. You know what I mean? To do it that way, but you probably have to click mute on a few people, which might actually be a benefit, because sometimes I want to click mute on people who are there in person. But anyway, it just is. So I just thought that was a really interesting concept, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say about that, because it's something that you may not, think of immediately when you're thinking about what revenue is actually being sacrificed during the quarantine. So that was that.
Right. But
let's go ahead and jump into Ask the Fight Guys, round 3. We got some really good questions this time.
This is where you're supposed to tell people, use the hashtag.
Use the hashtag, please. Ask the Fight Guys. It's on the screen, so I just kind of figured it.
Just saying.
Yeah, just saying. So I'm trying to figure out, where do I want to start here, because we had some compelling stuff. Well, Let's start with what our most recent, we just did an interview with rising 154-pounder Vasyl Lomachenko. And we had a nice comment on his, when we broke his segment out into an individual interview. And it comes from someone, his name is The Brotherhood. He's actually got 1,500 subscribers on YouTube, so he's creating his own following there. And he says, Mazique versus Lubin, meaning Erickson Lubin. Let's see it. I love that fight. I love that fight. I think that's good. See, when somebody suggests a fight like that, you know that they know what they're talking about, because they're not matching people at two completely different spectrums of their career and all this kind of weird stuff. Erickson Lubin's a guy who rose, got knocked out by Charlo in the first round, and has now won 3 fights in a row. He's trying to recoup. I know he was discussed possibly as a fighter that could have faced one of your guys. Didn't happen, but it was discussed. So he's right in that place where somebody like Vasyl, who is rising into the top 15 at 154 pounds, that totally makes sense. I mean, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that Erickson Lubin is a really good fighter. I think his rating is deserved. I think that, unfortunately for him, he got caught early, maybe underestimated the power by Charlo and got caught, and it is what it is, but he's been on the road back, and he's I think maybe might even be the top rated fighter right now in the WBC, which I think that's, the route he's going after. But yeah, this is definitely one of those big step up fight for Black Magic.
Yeah.
Because he hasn't had a fight against somebody like this. You know how we talk about levels? This is, with 17 wins, what does he have, 14 knockouts?
Yeah, I think it's 17 wins, 14 knockouts.
Okay. I mean, it's a really compelling matchup because you're going to know a lot, right? I mean, the Brotherhood makes a great point.
17 wins, 13 knockouts.
Okay, but he makes a great point, right? But here's the thing. So BoxRec is by no means perfect.
Right.
Okay. But it has an algorithm that measures and rates fighters based on level of opposition and performance. And when you look at Lubin's position versus Maison, there's a vast difference. Might even be 50 places.
Well, if you just look at something as simple as like the star rating, Travail is a 3-star fighter according to BoxRec, and Erickson Lubin is a 4.5-star fighter.
Right, but where do they have Lubin? Top 5?
Let's look at the ratings. I'm almost positive he's top 5 at super welterweight. Let me double check.
Maybe number 8?
Erickson Lubin. No, he's not. Erickson Lubin is 9th.
9th, okay.
He's 9th.
Maison has to be in the 50s.
More than likely. If you're 3-star, you got to believe that's probably where you are. Because he's not in the top 50. Yeah,
but he's probably in the 50s, 56, 58.
Let's see. It shows you 50. He's 54.
Okay. But I'm close enough. I mean,
for sure.
Close enough in there. That is a huge gap.
That's a cavernous gap.
and not to say that Maison can't come in and have a great performance and win. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is level of opposition based on this particular algorithm and how it works lets us know that Lubin has fought by far the higher quality opponents. And from an experience standpoint, he would be the favorite in this fight. But for Maison, this is a great opportunity, could be a great opportunity to say, okay, this is my step up. I mean, a year from now, that could end up being a world title.
Yes.
But, I mean, it's a great question to pose. That's a great, obviously for promotional reasons, it probably won't happen because Maison, with Golden Boy and Lubin being with PBC, we're probably not going to see it happen. We're probably more likely to see Maison against a Spike O'Sullivan and then a Patrick Teixeira if he's still holding the title. That's probably more the route that we're going to see, but it's definitely a great question. And if he was asking, what do we think about it? I think it's a great question. It's a great matchup. It would answer a lot of questions about both guys. It would just, if Lubin wins, it reinforces that he's where he's supposed to be at 154. If Maison wins, it really puts him in the conversation of being a top 10 rated fighter.
Yeah. And if the funny thing of it is that, Lubin's last fight was against Nathan Gallimore. And if you look at Nathan Gallimore, now losing to Lubin may have had something to do with this, but according to the BoxRec, Nathan Gallimore is ranked 68th. So it's not as if, Lubin isn't fighting people in that range from a evaluation standpoint. But obviously, as you mentioned,
well, that changed. That's the rating after the fight.
That's the rating after the fight. But I can't imagine he dropped that far from losing to a guy who was already top 10.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I'm pretty sure that Gallimore probably, because Gallimore is considered a 30-star fighter as well, according to BoxRec. So
and this is an imperfect metric, but it's something.
It is something. And I'm going to tell you, I appreciate BoxRec because there are so few statistical references and anything close to any sort of an absolute reference material or resource in boxing. People throw darts at BoxRec all the time, but I turn to those people and say, where's yours?
Brian, it's probably more accurate than the actual top 15 world ratings.
I would 100% agree. So, because I would rather deal with the flaws of an algorithm than to deal with the politics and the stuff that goes into getting guys ranked.
It's 100%. I could attest to that.
Yes.
I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying.
I'm just saying. So, all right, let's jump to our next comment, which now these are hefty, but I almost didn't know where to go. So, the boxing manager that you know from Louisville, Kentucky, Nick Barres. Yes, he went in really deep with the concept that we came up with when we were talking about Paulie, and we were talking about 5 people or fighters who have gotten the most out of less.
I love the fact that he's watching, by the way. I really appreciate that. Absolutely
appreciate it. So he literally went in and wrote what could have been an article, essentially about the 5 biggest overachievers in modern boxing in the last 15 years. So I'm not going to read it, word for word what he put here, but number 1, he had Julio Cesar Chavez. He said overachiever.
Okay.
He said he earned in excess of $10 million. He said he had average skills, cool style, and great marketing made him a lot of money. Wait a minute.
What about the great fighting?
You know what? Is he talking about senior or junior? I don't know. He says
must be junior.
You must be junior. He says
it has to be junior.
He says son of boxing royalty was able to parlay. Yes, he's talking about.
He meant junior. Okay.
Yeah, he just didn't put junior. Okay, so I'm good with that. I can actually agree with that. To be honest, I can agree with that. I mean, we're talking about a former world champion. He was a world champion.
I know.
And he almost knocked out Sergio Martinez, even though he got outboxed for the entire fight.
Yeah.
So you reluctantly give that, credit, but yeah, it's hard for me to argue with that.
Listen, let me tell you something that before you get to number 2, it's called prize fighting. Okay.
Yeah. You fight.
So, he made money. He won world titles. Maybe didn't have any business doing either. But he did. But he did it. I'm not hating on him. He did it.
You don't have no business with that belt, right? You know that.
But what I'm saying is, listen, also one thing we got to remember, okay? And let's be real.
Right.
Did Michael Jordan Jr. win?
Say it again.
How many championships did Michael Jordan's son win? How many?
You talking about Marcus and Jeff?
Any of them.
No,
how many championships have they won?
None.
Yeah, Pele's son, Adinho, how many championships did he win?
I couldn't tell you, but I'm assuming from context clues, none.
The point I'm making is that we can go down the list.
Yes.
It's so hard to live in that shadow because you're constantly being compared to your father.
Yeah. Some people
because the expectation.
Yeah, some people handle it better than
so
others.
big.
Yeah, some people handle it better than others. Obviously, like Ken Griffey Jr., Barry Bonds, all of those guys have handled it better. But it's rare. It's rare.
I know, but sometimes the kid's better than the father.
Yeah, and in those instances they are. But Bobby Bonds is a borderline Hall of Fame. Bobby Bonds was a heck of a baseball player. So
I'm saying, I'm just saying, this is a big shadow.
It's huge. It's hard.
A big shadow.
Super hard. Very rarely do you see a great father produce a great son in the same sport, where he matches that level of greatness. I can't think of anybody. Outside, like if you're talking about somebody who was a Hall of Fame father and their son also was a Hall of Fame level performer, I'd have to think for a minute, but I don't know that I know one right off the top of my head. So it is what it is. But yes, his number 2 is Chris Algieri. He says, right place at the right time allowed this kickboxing sensation to utilize his great conditioning against a much overhyped puncher in Provodnikov. I think is what he's talking about, Ruslan Provodnikov. Well, you know what? I can kind of agree with that. It was a right place, right time situation. because he had the kind of style that was just perfect, and the perfect style, the perfect approach, and the perfect mindset overall to beat Provodnikov. He was not going to fall into the same trap that Tim Bradley fell into. Tim Bradley is always been this guy who has this excellent boxing skill, above average speed, but could not accept the fact that he wasn't a power puncher. And he wanted to prove to people he had a knockout shot and that he was this brawler, when he could have just simply outboxed 98 to 99% of the people that he fought. And he ended up taking all kinds of shots, career life-altering shots against Provodnikov when he really didn't have to. And Chris Algieri was like, not going to be me. I can outbox this guy and make him like a fool for 12 rounds. You guys can call me whatever you want, but I'll take that W. And that's exactly what happened. And he...
Well, you can call him a former world champion.
You can. And he earned himself a payday against Manny Pacquiao.
And Errol Spence.
And Errol Spence because of it. You know, so say what you want, you know.
Yeah,
it is what it is. So I don't know if I can totally agree with the overachiever part for Algieri.
I mean, look, Chris is my friend, okay? And I'll say it. Chris overachieved. I mean, Chris overachieved. Chris's greatest asset might be IQ and his will to win.
Yeah.
But I think I think that boxing IQ is what won him the title. And his grit, I mean, his will to win, but he might have overachieved in his career because really he also has a very good manager, Keith Connolly, another friend of mine who he's been able to make sure that Chris has also gotten paid well. But Chris is a smart guy.
I look at Chris moves well.
Yeah,
and that's something that Chris is not like a square, stiff athlete. He moves
right, but look at his losses. I mean, they're big, these are like look at the names.
Yeah, so I it's not crazy, but he also has Berman Stavern. I guess
I didn't even know he achieved.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. He got 2 world championship fights, I guess. Is that what we're talking about?
Well, I mean, he got opportunities, but I don't think he really overachieved. I don't think Stavern's a good... I like the first 2.
Yeah, I don't dig that one. He also has Josecito Lopez. I dig it. I can dig it. I can definitely dig it. You want to talk about somebody getting it because of their grit and their... I mean, the Riverside Rocky dude brings it. Like, I'm telling you...
Almost beat Thurman.
Almost beat Thurman, beat Victor Ortiz when he wasn't supposed to. Before he helped let us know where Victor Ortiz's ceiling was.
Right.
We kind of knew after Marcos Maidana fight. We knew it was like, okay, yeah, it's a little shake. But then after that, Josecito Lopez, no, I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna bust the wall down, and we're gonna all see. And and like you said, I almost beat Thurman. And when I've seen him overmatched, it's still, the dude is still there. He's still there. Mad respect for Josecito Lopez. And I think he just put in an extra letter or something here, but he actually says Pauline Malignaggi. And I don't think he was taking a dig. I think it was Yeah, because he did it twice. He wrote it that way twice. So I don't know, but we maybe
doesn't like him.
We do agree that Paulie Malignaggi is on that list for sure.
I don't agree.
I mean, I think Nick and I agree. Man, come on.
You and Nick agree, and listen.
Be kidding me? You don't think that Paulie overachieved?
No, I think that I just don't. And listen, I'm not saying it because he's my friend, Brian. And I know you're thinking to yourself, oh, you don't want to talk about it.
No, I'm not thinking that at all.
I'm telling you, I just think people, but people don't know. He was a good amateur. He transitioned into the pros. Fighter, like I don't know where the overachieving was.
The overachieving
it's
based off of athleticism. He's not a freak athlete in any way, shape, or form.
Well, why do you have to be a freak athlete to be a successful fighter?
You don't have to be a.
Where's that criteria that you have to be an athlete to be a successful fighter?
Sport but
you don't have to be a freak athlete.
The prerequisite of achieving in a sport at a high level generally is that you have above average athleticism. to start.
And in my opinion, in this game, based on my own personal experience, it's 80+% mental. Okay, they haven't invented any new punches. There is a level of athleticism. Absolutely.
What is the single most important trait any fighter can have?
My opinion, ring IQ.
So ring IQ.
That's my opinion.
Ring IQ supersedes speed to you.
I mean, look, you asked me about my opinion.
And I'm asking for clarification.
I mean, look, some people might say power, some might say speed. Paulie had speed.
Paulie had speed, but Paulie didn't have blinding speed.
But he had speed. Are we going to talk about levels of speed? He had speed.
Yeah, he had speed.
He had great defense.
He had great defense, but I think his great defense is based off of ring IQ.
Right, that's right. That's what I'm saying.
Right, but what I'm saying is when you talk about somebody overachieving, generally what you're looking at, usually the way that definition breaks out is you look at what the person brings to the table that is a God-given ability, right? How fast are you? How strong are you? How good are your instincts? How good are your reflexes, your quick twitch reflexes? Those are the things. Everything else beyond that is things that you add with your hard work and your dedication and all of those sort of things.
I think we're undervaluing. So like for me, I think that defense gets undervalued sometimes. It's not undervalued. It's a part of. Why did he overachieve? Okay. Why did he overachieve?
It's a part of what I'm saying.
Because he didn't have freak athleticism. He didn't overachieve.
You don't have. You're not.
I know great athletes that couldn't fight.
You're not so. I understand that you're not so fast that you are the fastest guy in the ring every time you fight. And your power is such that it is such a low level that it is literally you're literally one of the least effective power punching guys in the history of anybody who has fought on his level. And I'm saying this the way that you're forcing me to make my point sounds like it's an insult to Paulie, but it's the exact opposite.
I'm not saying it's an insult.
We're talking about a multiple-time world champion.
Yeah, it's not an insult.
Who is able to get there with having the ability to only get 7 KO finishes in this long career. That is amazing to me. That is why I have people talk about. I talk to people and they talk bad about Paulie. I'm like, you're out of your mind.
But Brian, why can't we accept the fact that he was a masterful boxer? 7 KOs is only. I'm not missing the point. I don't think he overachieved. I just think he achieved. I don't think he overachieved.
I think you look
to overachieve, you had to have some sort of obstacle that held you back from achieving. And you superseded that.
I think athleticism is what would initially hold you back.
Where we're disagreeing is that we are disagreeing on his level of athleticism. Then
I think that's what it is, because I think if Paulie Malignaggi walks in the gym and you don't know who he is, just a kid that walks in the gym, and you ask someone, you see him move around for a little bit, you ask someone, you say, what do you think that guy's ceiling is? Nobody in that gym is going to guess that he would achieve what he ultimately achieved.
That's
nobody.
I
don't think anybody says that. I don't think anybody says this guy.
It's your opinion.
All of these freaking championships in multiple weight classes. Nothing about him says that when you look at him initially. Nothing. I don't see it. And neither does Nick.
We'll agree to disagree here.
And neither does Nick. So I don't know. That's just what I say. I don't know. But let's see. So I thought that was super interesting.
You know what we should do? I'm going to bring Paulie on.
Yeah.
So we can see if maybe he agrees with you.
You know what? I think he
wouldn't that be terrible if he agreed with you?
I actually think he does, and I'm going to tell you why. Because I've heard him talk about this subject before, and he's almost said something like this before.
Okay.
Because I know this guy has to have like coming up with certain guys. You know, some of the guys he came up with, around the same time. I know he had to be in the ring with some of those guys. Like, well, this guy's faster than me.
So what did you think of the Broner fight? Let's just go slow here. What did you think of the Broner fight?
This is actually a perfect example.
We're gonna go slow here. What did you think of the Broner fight?
I thought that Broner was superior than him in almost everything that you would consider when you're evaluating fighters, except for fight IQ.
So
And
you're
toughness.
saying that, some people made an argument that they thought Paulie won that fight.
I thought Paulie won that fight.
Okay. So you're saying that it was his Jedi Yoda-esque ring IQ and not athleticism that allowed him to compete in that fight against a really athletic fighter.
No, I'm not saying that he's out here like he's just a guy who's running a 10-second 40. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is when you're relative to other athletes in the sport who have achieved on his level, when you look at him and you look at other guys who have achieved on his level, multiple championships in multiple weight classes, and you compare them from a raw athleticism standpoint, he wouldn't appear to match up to those guys, but yet he does.
Maybe his athleticism is deceptive.
Maybe it is. It's very deceptive. But what's not deceptive is 7 freaking knockouts. 7 knockouts.
Listen, I'm going to tell you, it's not as you're zeroing in on just one aspect of the sport.
No, I'm not. I'm talking about
it's called the sweet science, not the knockout science.
I understand.
I'm just saying it's called boxing, not knockout. I know you know.
I know that.
I know you know.
So
I'm giving you a little bit of a hard time.
Yes. So what I'm saying to you is that if you also look at the other aspects of it that relate directly to athleticism,
someone's going to call you racist on this one, right?
Well, they can, but you know what people say. You know what? I told you this yesterday. White analysts are not allowed to criticize black fighters in some people's minds.
Right.
And black analysts are not allowed to criticize people who are white or Mexican, because if you are and I'm not saying all fight fans are this way, but there are a lot of fight fans. If me as a black analyst say anything that is critical about a non-black fighter, I'm racist. If you, as a white analyst or a white person that works in the game, if you say something bad about a black fighter, you automatically become racist. That's just what it is. If I take up for a black fighter, I'm only doing it because he's black and I'm black.
You know what the really sad thing about this whole thing is, Brian?
What's that?
That I want the audience know.
You said
we do this for. I want to let the audience know.
Yes.
We do this for about an hour, 3 days a week.
Yeah, and I'm so sick of it.
But these are our normal conversations for about 6 hours a day,
and
7 days a week.
He doesn't see me on the phone because I'm doing this.
But just so they know, this is a basic everyday conversation for us.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean,
he also doesn't know that there are times when he just puts me on mute and goes ahead and does whatever he's going to do. Rather than actually listen.
I don't cut you off on here nearly as much as I do in real life.
The only time you don't cut me off is
on here.
Muted me.
Right. By accident.
Oh my God, heaven help us today. All right, so that is Ask the Fight Guys round 3.
That was great. Those are 2 good questions. Really good questions.
They were really good. All right, so let's jump.
But guys, listen, comment now. I mean,
for sure.
Look, you're watching us. Just get in there, comment. Let us know what you think. There's nothing right or wrong. I mean, it's conversation. It's debate. We love to hear from you.
Absolutely. All right, so let's jump into our championship rounds. The first one is you were talking about Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury.
Right. And you had a question, I think.
Yes, because this is not the same. So let me preface this by saying this is not an apples to apples comparison. But we saw what is arguably the greatest sporting event of the last century take place, the Rumble in the Jungle. Had 2 African-American fighters. Now, I understand. We're talking about the 70s. And as African-Americans, there was a need and a strong reason to connect with the mother continent. There definitely was. Their fight was taken to Kinshasa, Zaire. To Don King worked together with I forget the name of the music mogul that he worked with to get the fight there. The information from the documentary is escaping me. I haven't seen it in a while, but that's how the plan was supposedly hatched to bring that fight there. Obviously, one of the major motivations for doing that was money. That was obviously Don King, they found a way and knew a way for that to be a windfall. I don't know. I wanted to ask you if you knew. I know you hadn't started working with Don at that point yet.
Right.
You were probably 3 or 4 or 5 years old at that point. So, but is there anything that you learned in regards to why that, what made him say, instead of Ali Foreman in LA, in Vegas, in wherever?
So I see where you're going with this. Okay. But I think that and I know what you're thinking. You're saying, look, Don got a government to give him a boatload of money to bring a huge event to put map. But it also made a little bit of sense too.
It did.
Bringing these 2 larger than life and, the greatest of all time to Africa.
Absolutely.
I mean, there was a bigger connection.
Yes.
So, I mean, and I see where you're going. I'm going to let you do your thing in the championship round, but to answer your question, I don't have any knowledge of the why, but from the document itself, When We Were Kings, the Oscar winning documentary, in addition to reaching it and understanding that it was really, I guess, the government saw this as a great way to put the name of the country on the map and, to pay for that. But I think for Don, it served a social purpose as well as a financial purpose.
Yes, and I would agree. And there was obviously a deeper connection taking 2 African-American fighters to Africa than there is taking a Nigerian British fighter and a Irish, no, he's not Irish. He's Gypsy traveler from the UK to Saudi Arabia. There's literally no connection there. The only connection is money. So I say that to say, I brung that up, but I didn't bring that up as a grounds for disagreement. I do agree. It would be a shame to not have that fight at Wembley Stadium. It would be a shame. But I'm pretty sure that if they were to do that, Eddie and everybody else involved have all the plans in the world about making that a trilogy or at least 2 fights. So perhaps
not if there's step aside money.
Well, there's step aside, and so
no one's doing step aside for 3 fights.
Well, no, not
at Wilder's age. I mean,
not at 3 fights in succession. But still, you've created the beginning of the series.
Yeah, but this is the one that would create the undisputed champion.
It is. It would. But so coincidentally, you said that there was a report that came out early this morning that both Deontay and Kubrat Pulev said they're not taking step aside money.
Yeah, there you go.
So it may not even be a thing either way. But
I think I prefaced it with it might not even be a thing.
It might not even be a thing. But if it was, I could see how he may be looking at it down the line. But you never know what happens. You simply never. If you would have asked people in the early 90s, early in the mid 90s, would Riddick Bowe and Lennox Lewis fight? Most people would have said at least once. But things happen. And
Lennox didn't want to fight him.
Yeah, right.
Threw his belt in the garbage.
Threw his belt in the garbage. But here's the thing.
For good reason.
But here's the thing. That could have been something that he just did that day or at that time. But somewhere down the line, maybe you do that knowing that really, it may look like an act of finality or totality, but that things can change. I can do this today. I can throw this belt in the garbage. I can make this whole dramatic scene. But in 2 years, we both keep winning. The fight gets bigger. We make it at another time, blah, blah, blah.
Or you open the door to a Holyfield trilogy.
Right. Yeah, you never know what happens, right? You think that there is going to be a later opportunity, but it turns out that there isn't. So now you lose this opportunity to have this all-time great fight that could be a huge payday. And so while you jump up and you do this now, and you do it in Saudi Arabia, maybe something happens with Tyson Fury and or Anthony Joshua where the rematch that could take place in Wembley Stadium just never happens. So you lose not only do you lose two big paydays, but you also lose the opportunity to have been a part of something that's truly historic.
Yeah.
So,
and like I said, maybe there's no validity to it, right? Maybe it's just maybe Mike's source is just Eddie Stern, just trying to, throw some bait out there, see how people react to it, see if people cry about it, see what people think, but I just think that fight has to take place in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it has to, but I think it would be better if it did. When I watch it, am I going to not tune in, or am I going to be less engaged because it's in Saudi Arabia? No, but some things just should be, and that should be in the UK. So it is what it is. All right, our next championship rounds, we talked about Bob Arum and the COVID-19 concept and how it affect pay-per-views. So I really want to get your feedback on that.
I mean, I don't know. Bob's a smart guy. He's been doing this for 50 years. Mm-hmm. I understand.
People give him credit for, I think.
Well, yeah, I guess, right? I mean, but who knows? I mean, I don't know. I think people are so desperate for content and so desperate for live sports that if they had an opportunity to buy a pay-per-view and it was a very compelling fight, but yet you couldn't throw your party and you're going to have to buy it yourself. I mean, I think some people might just buy it, but then again, I get it where people are struggling with money and maybe a pay-per-view is just it's not the right time for a pay-per-view. Yeah. I mean, who knows? It's unprecedented. So I think Bob was kind of even saying, like, who knows? Maybe this idea that even the licensing to bars buy the fight and people go and drink and congregate and watch the fight at a bar. The bar's paying that licensing fee.
But that's a people collection in itself.
I know. Yeah. Saying, like, there's many reasons a pay-per-view could flop, as opposed to people thinking, well, everyone's at home and they're, he's right. Like, what if that party where people chip in on the pay-per-view and they all come and it's it's an event in itself. Yeah. Just I mean, who knows, right? I mean, I think that some big fights they're not pay-per-views to begin with, like DAZN. Mm-hmm. I believe that, Canelo, Triple G, are they trying to make that a pay-per-view? I don't want to digress here, but it's like, if they do, I'd be kind of pissed considering that to pay a subscription.
You sold it to us saying they would never be a pay-per-view.
Pay-per-views model's dead.
Yes.
Except for this fight.
Right.
I'd be pissed.
Right.
Because it is what it is. But I mean, look, Bob makes a really good point and they have the data. I mean, he's been doing this since before pay-per-view when it was closed circuit. Mm-hmm. So, if anyone knows, he knows. So I have an opinion other than I would say Bob's probably right with whatever it is that he thinks is going to happen. Just because he would know. I mean, he would know. He would know what the market could bear. He would know just based on numbers. And look, people are struggling out there right now. I mean, I just don't know if someone could sit there and say, this $79.99, I'm putting it on this pay-per-view that could go, the main event could go 36 minutes or it could go 36 seconds. And I just don't know if this is the right climate financially where people have that discretionary income as opposed to paying the water bill or buying food. I just don't know if a pay-per-view is going to be at the top of the list, regardless of how desperate they are for live sports.
Yeah. You know what I wonder? And I don't know what you would say about this, but this is like
I disagree.
You probably do. But this is a over-the-top kind of a concept.
Okay.
And I'm good for those.
Okay.
But I'm wondering if there's another approach to the pay-per-view concept where a promoter or promoters could approach major businesses and say, essentially, can you donate a certain amount of money? And it wouldn't really be donated. It would really be more paying for sponsorship, but it would be positioned in a way to say, can you donate pay-per-view, what equates to pay-per-view fees, or what it costs the customer to buy pay-per-view. So what it would be positioned as to people who are, subscribers or who have different cable companies or what have you, whether you're with AT&T or Xfinity or whatever, it would be positioned as so-and-so and so-and-so series of companies has this pay-per-view is courtesy of them. So across a certain customer tier, the pay-per-view is automatically paid for. And what basically happens is all of these people within this particular customer tier get the pay-per-view automatically for free. But in exchange for that, the companies who are funding this get essentially, you would now have some level of some iteration of a commercial within the pay-per-view, and it would be for these different companies. I wonder what organizations might go for a model like that, because it would somewhat cushion a blow that could be felt from a gate standpoint, as well as from whatever hit is taken from the pay-per-view.
Right. I mean, it's just math. I mean, this is the traditional cable television commercial model.
Right.
You get a certain amount of viewership, certain amount of eyeballs. You pay X amount of dollars to be on the ring mat or have commercials that run within that programming block. And you're going to reach X amount of people. Then you're hoping that, some of it's branding, some of it's call to action. And you're hoping that you can attribute some of that audience to call to action, which translates to a sale, which can justify the spend. I mean, so that's really the model.
It just usually doesn't exist in pay-per-view, though, and that's
never exists in pay-per-view.
Right, it doesn't exist in pay-per-view, and that's where
I need the fans to guarantee that if someone were to say, "Look, we're going to stop," I mean, right now I know where you're going, and it's it would be great, but that would mean that the fans would all have to guarantee they're going to sit home and watch this, because right now it's just, people are struggling with money. A lot of people have been out of work. A lot of these businesses themselves have had to put their employees on furlough, even lay some of them off. I don't know how many of them could justify spending money on a boxing event instead of paying their employee. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't even know how that would go over. It would have to be a very unique situation.
You'd have to target the industries that are the industries
that are right. You'd have to go to Netflix, tell them, something where people are actually still making money and thriving during this time.
Yeah, that would be my approach.
Just tell Amazon should just write a check.
Amazon could probably write a check, I'm sure. So
they should just buy boxing.
So I do think that I don't know. I think it's something that sounds pretty interesting. We don't know. It's just something to throw out there, right?
Yeah. What do you guys think?
Yeah, we want to know for sure what you think. Make sure you leave it in the comment section for sure. That is all that we have today for this episode of The Fight Guys. Remember, we are powered by Fight TV and presented by Bet Online. You can watch us on YouTube if you're not already doing that. If you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe, like, and share this video. If you're watching us on YouTube, head over to Fight TV app and subscribe there for combat sports content as well. This is it for my man, Peter Kahn. I just want to say bye and thank you for watching. God bless.